alternate member of this committee, but I'm standing in as a full member, Wenger, as a replacement. So therefore, I'm now becoming a full member of this committee.
Noted, Mr. Mackenzie. You will have the voting rights for the person, Member Wenger, for whom you are an alternate in this meeting. Member Philander.
Pierre, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I wish to propose Honourable Dalen Mitchell to take over the chairmanship. Thank you.
Honourable Mitchell, do you accept the nomination?
Mr. Matthews, I accept.
Noted so. Member Kali.
Chairperson, Gillian Bosman.
Gillian Bosman.
Chair, I just wanted to second the nomination by Member Philander.
Noted. Are there any other nominations?
No, it's fine. I'm covered by Member Bosman seconding the nomination. Yeah,
thank you so much, sir. Member Mitchell, you are now duly elected as the chairperson, the temporary chairperson for this committee for this meeting. You may now assume the role of chairperson. Hello?
Chairperson?
Yes.
I'm more than happy to yield to Member Syed if Member Syed's nomination second can be noted in the minutes instead of mine.
Noted so, Member Bosman.
All right, thank you very much, members, and welcome to the meeting. Members, I have received through the procedural officer the apology from Member Christians. Are there any further apologies? Thank you. Mr. Matthews, if you could just note the apology from the chairperson.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, members. Members, we will first be briefed by the Department of Correctional Services as per the agenda. So I'm going to go straight into that if it's all in order.
Proceed, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Klaas, welcome to this committee meeting. I'm going to hand over straight to you once you are ready.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm ready.
All right, then you may proceed, sir.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Honorable members, good afternoon. I'm not going to dwell much on the background because I assume all of us by now would be knowing about COVID-19, where it originated from, what are the challenges. I will go straight into the background, which speaks to the Department of Correctional Services in the Western Cape. Now, the Western Cape Correctional Services Department has 10 management areas that are managed each by an area commissioner. And of the 10 management areas, we also have 43 correctional facilities or prisons, as if I were to use the old language, and 26 community corrections offices. The offender population as of the 6th of May is standing at 26,803 offenders. Of that number, 12,474 is remand detainees and 14,329 is sentenced offenders. So while we have 26,803 offenders, our bed space in the region is around 19,000, meaning we are overcrowded with almost 7,000 offenders. And you would see that because our remand population is now sitting at 12,000, that's where our major challenges are. We have 7,342 probationers and parolees, that is offenders that, or inmates that we are monitoring while they are in the communities. And our staff complement for the region is 6,847. Now, The design of a correctional facility is such that it is not really designed to prevent the outbreaks of disease. As of now, we have only 4 new correctional facilities that we call which were designed post 1994, which are not as overcrowded as a number of other correctional facilities. Those 4 are 1 Brandvlei Maximum, Van Renstorp Medium, Warrenbokkenveld in Ceres Medium, West Coast Medium. Oh, sorry, there are 5 in Goodwood Medium. The rest of our facilities, we still have the big halls where in the main offenders, I would say, are being warehoused. Now, since the outbreak of COVID-19, we have developed the regional level standard operation procedures, which we aligned with our national standards. We also developed the risk mitigation plan. Now, all management areas have to customize these plans for their operational challenge specifics of each center. And since the outbreak, what we then had to do was to make sure that we clean all our facilities. That was the first step. We made sure that all facilities, we scrapped them down, all the cells, kitchens, sick bays, and offices. And over and above that, we had to make sure that we changed the linen and blankets of offenders on regular basis. And also in line with our plan, we are on daily basis screening all officials on duty at our facilities. We are also screening all offenders. Now, most of our offenders were not negative at the start of the outbreak of the virus, because as I said, that we have been screening them on regular basis. Our level of risk in the main did not come from offenders, but it came from officials. Because as you would see when I speak to centers that had an outbreak, you would realize that it is partly because officials in some of those areas do not stay in our terrain, but they stay in various communities. So thus far, we have 5 facilities where there's been an outbreak of COVID-19, which I'll speak to. The first one was Allandale. At Allandale Correctional Facility is situated in Paarl. We have 4 officials who have tested positive. Of the 4 officials, 2 of them are staying in Khayelitsha, and the other 2 in Mbekweni. In Mbekweni and one in one of the townships in Paarl. The second one, we have at Brede River Management Area, we have Worcester Female, where we had 5 officials who tested positive. Of the 5, 1 of them is staying in our terrain in Worcester, the other 4 were staying in town in Worcester and in Zweletemba. The biggest number
26 in this record on duty 26.
Colleagues, can I please ask, my apology, Mr. Klaas, can I please ask that all the cameras are switched off and all microphones are muted? Brigadier Forscale, I think you're the guilty party. If you can switch off your camera and mute your microphone, please. Thank you very much. Mr. Klaas, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. Now, Warmbokefeld Correctional Facility, which is located in Ceres, that's where we had 27 officials who tested positive. And most of those officials are staying in Nduli, which is a township just next to Ceres. Some of them are staying in Ceres itself. In Goodwood Correctional Facility, we had 6 officials who tested positive. And of the 6, there is a mic that is on that is really disturbed. Yes, all right, thank you. Of the 6 officials, 4 of them are staying again outside in various communities. Only 2 are staying in our premises. Portsmouth Medium B Correctional Facility, we have 2 offenders who tested, officials who tested positive. Voorburg Medium A Center, we have 2 officials who tested positive. So all in all, we have 50 officials who tested positive for COVID-19. However, I must indicate that 21 of the 50 have since tested negative in follow-up tests after 14 days. In terms of the recovery rate. 2 of our officials are still hospitalized in Worcester. Now, flowing from the 2, you then see that we have 3 offenders who tested positive. All of those offenders tested positive because they were in contact with some of these officials in the various management areas. We had 1 offender at Worcester, female, who tested positive. That offender is currently responding well to treatment. We had to move that offender to the isolation site at Portsmouth Medium A in our sick bay. The second offender who tested positive was from Warmbokefeld Correctional Facility. We had to move him to the sick bay at Brandfley Maximum, which is our isolation site. The third offender who tested positive was from Goodwood Correctional Facility. We have also moved him to Brandfley sick bay. Now, what we then did as a department was to establish a number of quarantine sites in all our correctional facilities for offenders, and we also established a number of isolation sites. We also did the same for officials. Starting with offenders, as I said, all correctional facilities, all 43, they have the quarantine sites. But for isolation sites, it is only few areas that are specialized. Portsmouth Medium A sick bay, we converted the Medium A school also into a sick bay for 46 offenders. We also cleared 1 unit at Medium B called B unit, where we can accommodate 140 people. We then have Brandfley Old Hospital, where we can accommodate around 45 offenders. Southern Cape, Mossel Bay Youth Center, we have 89 beds there. George Training Center, we have 45 beds. Rubik West, we have 124 beds. We cleared the whole correctional facility. Havekwa, we have 116 beds. We also cleared the whole facility in the event that our numbers increase. Then, apart from identified quarantine, these are for the offenders. For officials, We identified sites in most of our management areas where we have guest houses. Portsmouth management area, we have a guest house where we could accommodate officials who are either in isolation or on quarantine. Dragonstein management area, Brandflay management area, George management area, and Mossel Bay management area. That's where we have guest houses. However, in areas where we don't have guest houses, we have been engaging municipalities and the Department of Health at provincial level for assistance in the event that our official, particularly junior officials, are not able to self-isolate, either because they stay in overcrowded areas or houses, like those who come from Kailicha, who might be staying in squatter areas and so on. So currently we have one official who is in isolation at Blue Lagoon Hotel under the Department of Health. On a weekly basis, we have engagement with the Department of Health, represented by Dr. Engelbrecht, where we share notes, we share experiences, we discuss how we could support one another. Tomorrow, our teams and the team from the Department of Health will jointly visit Portsmouth, where they need to look at our operations at a closer level and see how they could support us further. We have also started with mass screening of offenders and officials in Portsmouth and in Goodwood. We are done with the mass screening in Worcester female. All offenders were tested. Also, Worcester male, we tested all offenders who might have been in contact with the officials who tested positive. In Varam-Bokefeld, we tested all offenders. In Goodwood and Portsmouth, we are testing all offenders in units where those officials who tested positive may have been in contact with those offenders. So, working closely with the Department of Health, there is testing. When it comes to the challenges we have, one of our major challenges is the availability of the nursing staff. In the head office at the beginning of the month, gave us permission to employ an additional 77 nurses, which all were appointed and reported on the 1st of May. But we still have shortages and challenges in various areas. For instance, if I'm to make an example about Portsmouth. Portsmouth management area has around 6,000 offenders in that precinct. We have 37 nurses only. And of the 37 nurses, in fact, 37 positions, of those, 8 posts are vacant, so we are still recruiting, meaning it leaves us with 29. Of the 29, 1 nurse tested positive, and 13 nurses who are working closely with these ones are currently out of circulation. They are on quarantine. That leaves us with only 15 nurses operational. So those are kinds of engagements we are having with the Department of Health to say, in the event that our nurses test positive, we will have to work closer with them for assistance, because we will still have to provide offenders with healthcare services that are necessary. And then secondly, when it comes to the PPEs, we have a huge shortage. We continuously place orders, but suppliers are indicating that they are running short of staff. Internally, we are currently in a process of producing face masks for all offenders and officials. To date, we have produced 29,000, and we hope in 2 weeks' time we would have produced enough for all the offenders and officials in terms of the face cloths. But with other PPEs, we are still waiting for the deliveries from various suppliers. That becomes our biggest challenge. As I said, another challenge is officials who are staying outside our facilities, and those who are using public transport are the ones who seems to be a greater risk. What we have done now, given the challenges we're experiencing, was also to divide.
Mr. Klaas, okay. My apologies for interrupting you. Could I request that you have another 5 more minutes? I know that you've indicated that you need to leave by 3 o'clock, and I would really like to give all members an opportunity to engage you with questions and provide you an opportunity to respond to their questions. If you could work with me, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. I think I have only 2 items. I would take even less than 5 minutes. What we have done was to divide our operational staff into Division 1 and Division 2, so that not all officials at center level are on duty at the same time, so that even if one division becomes sick, the other division will be available. So we started to implement the 2 divisions, and we are trying to make sure that different centers share the little PPEs that are available. And as I said in conclusion, that we are working very closely with the Department of Health to make sure that we mitigate any risk. So as of now, we think we are managing. The only thing that may arise, should we not be able to manage, the Correctional Services Act empowers a head of center who, if he or she thinks for security reasons, he or she is unable to manage because of overcrowding and the outbreak of disease and related issues, and therefore the lives of offenders are at risk, the head of center is authorized to release them. But at this stage, for us, given the levels of crime out there and all that, that would be the last resort. And if that decision were to be taken, even though the head of center is empowered to do so, we would only let the minister be the one who takes that decision as and when it's necessary. I am aware that there are engagement between the minister, the inspecting judge, Judge Cameron, and the chairperson of the National Council on Correctional Services, NCCS, Judge Desai, the 3 of them are closely monitoring the situation, and should there be a need to release offenders under any circumstances, the 3 of them will make the call. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klaas. Members, before I hand over to you to ask questions, I have been informed by the procedural officers after my election that the South African National Defence Force will not be presenting to the committee today. There was a request from the procedural officers to the South African National Defence Force, and no apology or confirmation has been received at the time of this meeting. I have also been informed that Member Wenger will join this meeting intermittently, and that Mr. Klaas has confirmed that he will make his presentation available to the members of the committee after this meeting. Members, I'm now going to hand over to you. I'm going to start with the DA, and we will use the same rules and procedures as we've always used, and each political party or members from a political party will be allowed a 3-minute opportunity to ask questions. And then, Mr. Klaas, if you could just jot down those questions, and at the end I will provide you an opportunity to respond to the members. Members, please be mindful that Mr. Klaas would need to leave the meeting at 3 o'clock. All right, the DA.
Thank you, Chairperson Regan Allen. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Klaas. I would like to ascertain regarding if there's a breakdown for the prisoners that has been released since the lockdown, and whether SAP station commanders or the SAP stations in the various areas, including the victims or family victims, are informed if a parolee is then released into the community. Also, if you can confirm the amount of vacancies at Pollsmoor, and why does it sound to be such a big amount, and since when has those vacancies been in place? But also, I would want to double check in terms of the access control and the procedure for staff when commencing work. What security measures and protocols are in place, especially in respect of the health and safety regulations under the Disaster Management Act? For example, would each facility have an infrared thermometer to check staff temperature, etc.? What measures have been put in place? Because you mentioned quite a number of staff members that have fallen positive to this matter. And also with regard to the sites that you mentioned for mass screening, does that mean that each and every inmate in that specific sites were actually screened? And then another one, in terms of the face mask, is that reusable? I heard that you mentioned it's a cloth one. So what system is in place to make sure that that actually not only stays clean, but doesn't carry on the virus furthermore? And then specifically to the Allendale Correctional Facility, there's been allegations that there's even more inmates that tested positive. Do you have any clarity on that for us as well at this stage? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Allen. The ANC.
Hello, Chair.
Yes, Honourable Dagmo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings, members and Commissioner Klaas. I would just like to ask, at a time like this, how does the parole board or the various parole boards continue to operate and function? That is the first question I would like to ask. Is if the Commissioner could just give us an update as to the number of parole boards that are operating and how they are dealing with matters of parole during this time of the lockdown. And then I would also just like to ask a question in regard to whether the Department of Correctional Services has any plans together with the Department of Public Works to build additional correctional services during the short to medium term. And then thirdly, if we could just have a clear statement as to whether the current occupancy levels across the provincial correctional facilities are above the desired average capacity or below, and if they are above, by how many numbers and by what percentage are they currently above the desired occupancy levels? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Dugmore. The EFF.
Thanks, Chairperson. Mine is very short. Is on the issue of the quarantine site. If the correctional services is considering, under the circumstances of seeing that some of their members who are staying in densely populated areas might be affected and not assist with the curbing of this pandemic. Is it possible that the department could consider taking those people out of those communities to identify some certain sites where they would be able to be making their movement between, especially the junior members that they've referred to as staying in shacks and in areas that are not safe in terms of contracting the pandemic. So that's point number one. And then number two is that in terms of we have seen that the Department of Health in the province has identified some certain areas that they would identify as hospitals. Is the correctional services also looking at such kind of outside the facility themselves in terms of prisons, areas where they would be able to see to it that if members, in particular for members, they would be taken to? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kwejo. Good.
Thanks, Chair. I'm covered.
Thank you, Honorable Heron. The Freedom Front Plus. Okay, Mr. Klaas, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, honorable members. The first question that speaks to parolees. The parole process is still continuing. If an offender has to be released on parole, what we did was we said all offenders who had defined release dates, we continued with those placements. Obviously, we do liaise with the nearest police station to say so-and-so's parole has been finalized, he ought to be released, because we couldn't stop with that. The second thing was we urged parole boards not to give offenders release dates that are now. They should give them release dates that are filed. So in a way, we are reducing the number of releases on parole that we do. But thirdly, because some of the parole processes, before they could happen, we need to have a victim and the offender interacting, but given the restrictions placed, we then said that such interaction, where it ought to happen, it will have to be telephonic. So there has been those engagements where the victims would be informed telephonically, and there would be that mediation between the victim and the offender before that is processed. What I would also maybe circulate for members is the directive from our head office regarding level 4 and how do we deal with the issue of releases within the national framework. The same applies if offenders are released, that is now those who are released on the expiry of their sentence. Because of the restrictions placed again on movement, we are dropping them in front of their homes where they should be dropped. We don't just release them and let them take public transport, given the fact that there are limitations with public transport. The issue of vacancies. I can be able to send you the information, but the point I was referring to was specifically for the nursing vacancies. That's the figures or the numbers I was giving. The only challenge, and maybe I must indicate, one of the challenges that we have generally with nurses is that we have a high turnover rate. You employ them today, tomorrow they move out. The nurses and social workers, most of the time, I would say DCS is regarded more as a training facility, because the minute a person has experience, most hospitals, both private and public, would poach those at a higher salary level. It's something that we have raised with our head office to see how we could compete at a financial level, but I think it's a challenge. And I think members would understand that the Department of Correctional Services is given a budget to run a correctional system, not a health system. So when an offender is sick in our facility, we take them to the public hospitals. That is why if you go to public hospitals, you'll find correctional officials guarding offenders in hospitals. So whatever measures we place in our facilities are limited by nature. We are constrained both by the budget and by law to say that we must run semblance of not even a full primary health care, but semblance of a primary health care. Where there are problems, we take an offender to the nearest hospital. The issue of access control, yes, we have infrared thermometers. We take temperatures of officials on a daily basis, we screen them. But in most instances, most of the officials who tested positive were all screened and they never showed signs. If I were to make an example, one official who tested positive and died was for 2 weeks guarding an offender at Karl Bremer Hospital. Not only did we screen that official on regular basis, the hospital itself on daily basis, the hospital was screening the official. On Friday, the official knocked off from work. On Saturday morning, he woke up and said to the wife, he doesn't feel well. The wife took him to a hospital. Sunday, he was there. Sunday evening, he passed on. It was only 2 hours after the death that the hospital then phoned us to say he also had he tested positive of COVID. So you take Portsmouth female. When one official tested positive and the Department of Health there and our team decided to test others, those who were in contact with them, all of them, in terms of the screening process, they were not symptomatic. So not everybody, screening can help, but it can only tell you if somebody has some of the symptoms, then that person would screen yes, then you'll refer him. But if a person doesn't show any symptoms of COVID, it doesn't necessarily mean that person is negative. The mass screening, what we have done is that, the mass testing. The mass testing, we are only testing either in centers where many officials are positive, like Barenbergveld, we had to test all officials because we have 127 officials. Sorry, you had 27 officials who tested positive. So all 450 offenders had to be tested, because then you couldn't trace to say this official 27, which offenders they might have been in contact with and which one not. Worcester female, we did the same. Portsmouth, we are not testing all offenders. We will only test those who are symptomatic, meaning who are showing symptoms, and the units where the officials who tested positive are working in. The same with Goodwood, we are only testing certain units where those offenders may have had contact with an official who is positive. But obviously, as I say, the numbers change daily depending on our engagement with the Department of Health and the tracing of who has a link with who. The issue of masks, yes, we are providing each official with 2 cloth masks, each offenders with 2 cloth masks. The reason we are providing 2 is to enable them to wash another one. They are washable, they are reusable. So over and above the masks that we have for either our nursing staff, doctors, or offenders, or officials who are working in the front line, those ones we provide them with surgical masks and not with the cloth masks. And then in Allendale, there are no inmates who tested positive in Allendale. So I'm not sure where does that rumor come from, that there were inmates in Allendale who tested positive. We only have officials who tested positive, and I think I gave the figure earlier on. And maybe just to say, when it comes to our figures of those who tested, yeah, Alandale, I had said it's 4 officials. This statistic is a statistics that you can verify with the Department of Health, because they are the custodians of this statistic. Whatever information when it comes to those who are positive or those who have tested and are negative, we provide this information from the Department of Health. Parole boards functionality. As I said, the parole boards are continuing to function, and there are guidelines provided to us from head office, which are indicating on each phase what are the things that a parole board ought to do. But as I said, in terms of their work, they will have to increase telephonic engagement between victims and offenders and perpetrators, so that we are able to still continue, because we will not be able to keep offenders beyond certain periods. If taken to court, we may not win. So that's why our parole boards are still functional. The new facilities, at this stage, we don't have any plans to build any facility, mainly because of budgetary constraints. We obviously, as a region in the Western Cape, for us to be able, beyond COVID, to deal with overcrowding, and also to replace some of the old facilities that we have. We still have a facility like Portsmouth Medium C, which is asbestos. We still have a facility like Brandflame Medium B and Voorberg Medium B, which are zinc structures. Apart from that, we have structures like your Portsmouth Admission Center, Portsmouth Medium A, which were built in the early 60s, late 60s, which are beginning to fall apart. So we have indicated what bed space we need. Those submissions were made to head office. They were made by head office to National Treasury. But to date, National Treasury did indicate that there are no resources for that. So our overcrowding is we're supposed to be at 100% in terms of the offender population. We are currently sitting at 147% overcrowding, but I can send you again our daily unlock with all that breakdown. With respect to the issue of accommodation, like as I said, correctional officials are members of society. Now, most of those who have medical aids, for testing, they use their medical aid. Those who don't, who have arrangements with the Department of Health, they test them in the public health institutions. For quarantine sites, in areas where we don't have quarantine sites, the Department of Health and the provincial government are assisting us. As I've indicated, we have an official already that is placed at Blue Lagoon Hotel. Because remember, overall budgets were given to them, not to correctional services budget is meant strictly and mainly for offenders. The issue of isolation sites, the same thing. We are working closely with health, where an official cannot self-isolate. We engage, and the Department of Health is assisting us. With respect to offenders, we have agreed with the Department of Health that we will keep those offenders who are sick in our isolation sites. But jointly with the Department of Health, we will monitor those sites, meaning they will have an oversight over those sites to make sure that they meet all the requirements. But in the event an offender becomes sick, very sick now, that offender must go to a public hospital in line with the current protocols. DCS responsibilities becomes only to go and guard that offender in hospital, meaning when a maximum offender gets sick, he sends to hospital, we must send him with 2 guards. When it's a medium or minimum offender sent to hospital, we must send him with 1 guard. And the guard must be next to the offender 24/7. As and when the guard is, if the guard is alone, when he or she goes to the bathroom, the offender must be chained in bed. Then he goes to the bathroom, he comes back, he unchains the offender. So those are protocols that have been in existence, and we are working very closely, as I said, with the Department of Health to make sure that we deal with those challenges. Chairperson, I think I've covered all questions unless I may have missed 1 or 2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klaas. Members, are you satisfied? All your questions been adequately answered?
Chairperson, if I can just jump in again, is that okay?
Honourable Alan, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Klaas, for the information that you provided. In terms of you mentioned that there is some interaction with members of the family or the victim itself, if it's via telephonic, and the SAP station. What information are you able to provide the committee with in terms of a detailed report for the last 6 months, for example, if we are able to get that information? But also, in terms of the Allendale one, it's regarding staff members specifically. And I can understand the collaboration between health, etc. But are you confident to say that measures are in place? But also, just lastly, Chairperson, there's a relative high number of infected staff members at the various facilities, like we heard now. And is that not a sign that staff members are potentially not observing social distancing and other factors that we can expect from the general public? And what is Correctional Services doing to ensure that staff will actually follow their protocols? Because depending on the amount of time, it is a significant percentage, but would they be able to even move staff from one facility to another, or even recall retired staff? What measures are really in place should it come to a point where it becomes inevitable that the situation needs to be contained? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. Members, in the interest of fairness, is there any follow-up from the ANC? EFF?
Yes, Chair. Yes.
Chairperson, there's no follow-up from the ANC.
All right, thank you. The EFF?
Yes, Chair, I've got one.
Honourable Kleiko, 1 minute for you.
Sure. I hear that members are also responsible, Correctional Services members now, are responsible to look after these sick inmates, even if they are in hospitals. Now, what I want, and there's a case of one who passed away. Now, I want to understand that, are they provided with equipment that would prevent them from contracting this disease, or they are just subjected to their security responsibility? Because how do you get to be sent to a hospital to look for somebody who might be passing on at any time without protective gear yourself? Or if the gear they are using, is it adequate enough to protect them from contracting the disease?
Thank you very much, Honourable Kleiko. Honourable Heron, anything from your side?
No, thank you.
All right, and then the Freedom Front Plus, if they're not here. Going to hand over to you, Mr. Klaas. You've got 8 minutes to respond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, as I said, maybe let me explain the serious one where we had 27 officials who tested positive. Most of those officials stay in Nduli. Now, most of them, on the 15th of last month, as you are aware, that's the day public servants get paid. Most officials in Ceres went to Shoprite Checkers, which is the only Shoprite Checkers in Ceres. And the following day, on the 16th, that Shoprite Checkers was closed down when it was said that some of the staff members at Shoprite tested positive. Now, if you take an area like Ceres, the explanation, I think the MEC of Health did also explain that you had that Shoprite Checkers and you also had employees who work in a factory, I think in one of the juice factories there. And again, our officials are buying juice in those areas. So the measures Correctional Services has taken are measures that would apply the minute these officials enter our premises, coming to work and knock off. When they are out after working hours, all we can do is just to make an appeal to people to observe social distancing. However, the reality is that given the shortages of security personnel, in this instance, I'm talking about the police, the army, and so on. If you can go to Nduli today, now, you will find kids are playing in the street. It's like it's in Christmas. In fact, when I came back from Nduli, I phoned the Provincial Commissioner of SAPS, and we had a telephonic engagement. And as I was explaining to her what I've seen in Nduli, she was explaining to me what she had seen in Worcester, Thembalethu, where a similar situation is happening. So yes, we are trying as part of government to do a lot of public education with our officials to make sure that they do it with their families. But the challenge is that the spaces people use, particularly in small towns like Ceres, are the same spaces, which creates a bit of a challenge. Other areas, as I said, that we have a detailed thing that we do in our facilities. But when an offender knocks off and he goes home, we don't have control over what he or she does in his house, except to make an honest appeal to people to say, please comply, comply, comply. Members who are guarding offenders in hospitals, yes, we are providing them with PPEs. We are trying to make sure that they have all the necessary PPEs. That has not always been the standard. In the past, a member would only be provided with PPEs if the offender he or she is guarding has what was then described as a contagious disease. And that was a decision we take jointly with the Department of Health. That's why in this instance, the offender who was guarded by this official who passed on was only tested when the official has died. And by the way, tested negative, which then says that the member did not get it from that official. He might have been to a shop or a site where he might have had contact with a positive person, or he might have been in contact with a positive person in the hospital, but not necessarily the one he was guarding. So I thought I should make that point. But yes, we are providing members as far as possible with all the PPEs. We are trying to make sure that they comply. In terms of whether shortage of staff and all that, by the time this process started, we had already recalled staff members who had resigned before and retired, some of them. We recalled quite a number of them. As I said, with nursing, we've recalled 77 of those. Some of them were working with us and retired. They started on the 1st of May. And where we are running short of staff members in a particular facility, we are also taking staff from another. For instance, if you take Worcester Female, when some of those officials tested positive, all 65 officials working in that site were placed on quarantine. we had to transfer staff from other centers to go and assist and manage that site until all those officials were tested, and those who were cleared were brought back. Others were still kept on quarantine for 14 days, after which they were then brought back. So our staff members were able to move a person from one site to another depending on the need. The same we're trying to do now with even the nurses and the doctors, because we have 3 doctors employed for the whole Western Cape. Other doctors that we are utilizing is sessional doctors. They work in hospitals and work in our facility only for a number of hours. We have 3 pharmacists employed. Others are sessional workers again. I think I should pause there, Chairperson, in the interest of time.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Klaas. Members, if you have any further follow-up questions to Correctional Services through Mr. Klaas, we will provide an opportunity for you to do so via the procedural officer, as we always do. Mr. Klaas, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you for your presentation to the committee and for answering the committee questions. We look forward to receiving your presentation, and then all other further follow-up questions or questions that the members have, we will direct to you in writing.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Members, we will now move on to the presentation by the South African Police Services and IPID. I'm going to allow the South African Police Services to first do the presentation. Thereafter, I will give an opportunity to IPID, and then after the 2 presentations, we'll then open the floor for questions and answers, if that's in order with everyone. If so, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome the Provincial Commissioner, Lieutenant General Matikata and Brigadier Forscale, that will do the presentation today. I'm going to ask Mr. Matthews if you could please make sure that the presentation by SAPS is available to the members on the screen. And once that is done, I will immediately hand over to SAPS to do the presentation.
It's always behind the media space.
Members, can I ask, are you all seeing the presentation?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
then I'm
Chair.
going to hand over to Lieutenant General Matikata and Brigadier Forscale if you want to make any opening remarks.
Good afternoon, Chair and the honorable members. Thank you for the opportunity to do this presentation to yourselves. With me is Major General Manga, the Deputy Provincial Commissioner for Policing, and Brigadier Forscale, the Head of Organizational Development, as well as Colonel Foslo, who is responsible for visible policing. I will hand over then the presentation will be taken through by Brigadier Forscale. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very, very much. Brigadier Forscale, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, honorable members. If we can look at the table of contents, I'm going to give a brief introduction. Then I'm going to cover certain general information. There's 1 or 2 slides that we've added. I will indicate which ones they are, but I'm going to give an overview of the daily staffing levels. Then I'm going to cover what we call an executive dashboard, covering a number of issues, including the employees equipped with standard protection equipment, PPEs, at police stations, then covering our vehicles that are equipped with PPE equipment, the buildings that are covered with PPE equipment, what our contingency planning looks like in terms of our frontline services, the current status and implementation of contingency planning. In other words, where we are having challenges currently in terms of our frontline services, and then an operational overview dealing with the number of permits being issued, the issuing of permits, and then certain questions which the committee raised with regard to the issuing of permits. And then I'm going to finish with a couple of the challenges we're facing and a kind of a commitment which we are giving. Thank you. Honourable Chair, in terms of the brief introduction, I think it's known that since the state of disaster was declared by the President of the Republic, the Western Cape operationalized the regulations and directives issued by the Office of the National Commissioner and our NAT joint structure. Subsequently, an operational command structure was established consisting of what we call a Provincial Core Command Group, or PCCG, which convenes on a daily basis and reports then directly to the National Core Command Group. The PCCG consists of all the relevant role players, the law enforcement agencies, led by SAPS, SSA, Metro Police, Traffic, as well as law enforcement, the SANDF, and then a number of government departments, Department of Health, Correctional Services, Home Affairs, Education, Community Safety, Agriculture, Transport, and Social Development. Then our Prosecuting Authority, as well as the parastatal ESCOM. The PCCG is responsible to exercise command over all aspects relating to the COVID-19 threat. We have to execute on those particular aspects. We have an integrated police response teams that have been activated in all the clusters. These teams are responsible for the monitoring of non-compliance with the COVID-19 regulations, responding to looting of liquor and other shops, areas where food parcels are distributed, and public protest action, as well as operationalizing early warnings received from our crime intelligence environment. If we move across to some of the general information, this is a slide which is absent from that presentation, which I've added. We've covered certain daily staffing levels, which I think is critical for the committee to take note of. Currently, in terms of identified critical functions which we have an availability of a total of 13,803 people available. I'm going to skip the next one. We've deployed currently 127 people into those critical functions. We have ready for deployment. And this is what I'd want to term our reserve force, if I can call it that, where we experience shortages or infections. We have a reserve force for deployment of 3,716. We have in lockdown, which is our Public Service Act personnel, which in terms of our protocols are our non-essential staff, we have currently 1,866. The casualties we have in terms of COVID-19, these are positive infections, a total of 153. The 153 includes 14 from national competencies. So we have, in other words, 139 from the SAPS Western Cape, and then 14 from national units. I think something I just want to note is that you'll see over the last two and a half weeks, we had particular challenge in terms of our visible policing environments, particularly our call center, our 10111 center, and then our flying squad, which is our serious complaint response capability. What is positive to note is that both these environments recommence duty on the 1st of May, at 0600. Flying squad resumed with a total of 154 members, and our call center commenced duty with 147 members as of the 1st of May. Subsequent to their commencement with duties, we've instituted even more stringent testing, daily testing for every shift, with the infrared thermometers, with the completion of the prescribed COVID-19 screening forms, which are completed prior to the commencement of every shift. And to date, a week later, we have experienced no further problems at these particular environments. If we move across to what I term an executive dashboard, it refers to the employees being equipped with the standard personal protection equipment, PPEs, at police stations. On the far left, you will see there's a total of 151 police stations. We've set a minimum standard, you'll see at the bottom block, where members must have access in terms of the minimum standards to a minimum of 2 masks per shift, 2 sets of gloves per shift, and 100 ml of hand sanitizer per 12-hour shift. By setting this kind of minimum standard, it enables us to project and to ensure that we have the minimum stock levels at all times. So we do it in 3 ways. 1, if there is an insufficient, so you'll see the red, amber, and the green. Red indicates that we don't have sufficient stock in terms of that minimum threshold for all our members. Amber will indicate we have sufficient stock currently, but perhaps not enough for 7 days. And green indicates we are covered for 7 days minimum in terms of the availability of stock PPEs for all our members. I think what is positive at the moment is we have sufficient PPE equipment for our members at all 151 police stations in the province. Currently, there are no shortages for a minimum of 7 days. Note we are receiving stock in essence twice a week in terms of the trucks that are delivering PPE equipment in large volumes. So this is an ongoing replenishment exercise, and we have, as a provincial leadership, decided to ensure that we have a reserve stock at all times. So if any station does run out, we have reserve stock that can be issued immediately to ensure that they have that minimum of 7 days stock availability. The next slide refers to our vehicles. And again, we've set a standard where each vehicle should have a minimum of a litre of sanitizer per week available for that particular vehicle. Again, you'll see of the 151 stations, you'll see all 151 stations, the vehicles have sufficient stock, and they've been equipped with sanitizing equipment sufficient for a period of 7 days. Again, I wish to reiterate, if there's an issue around sanitizing equipment and it goes to amber, we immediately alert it. We monitor these stock levels on a daily basis, and we can issue from our reserve stock pending the delivery of the additional stock bi-weekly or twice a week. With regard to our buildings, we've set a minimum criteria. Every building has to have a minimum of 1 5-litre per week available. Again, of the 151 police stations delivering frontline services, we have sufficient stock in terms of sanitizing equipment for all 151 stations for a minimum of 7 days. In terms of the executive dashboard, if we look at our contingency planning, in terms of our frontline services, you'll see on the far left, we've got 187 primary premises. Those 151 premises are made up of 151 police stations and then a further 36 premises that are either satellites or contact points. If you look on the top block on the right, you'll see police stations. It indicates that in terms of our contingency planning, if there's a need to decontaminate and close the police station for the period in terms of our protocols for 48 hours, in terms of our contingency planning, of the 151 police stations, 114 will temporarily operate from an alternative building, which has already been identified within the station precinct. To date, we've already had to do that at certain police stations, and it has worked successfully. We have 37 police stations that, if they have to temporarily close their services or the building, their services will be provided from alternative neighboring stations. With regard to the 36 satellite or contact police stations, the decision has been taken that if they need to vacate those satellite police stations, we will revert the service to the primary police station. So they will be served then from the main police station. That is in terms of our contingency planning. We had the scenario with 10111 where our call center was closed and we reverted the services in terms of our contingency planning to our cluster operational rooms. I think it was to 6 cluster operational rooms, as well as to our base in Fora to deal with the number of complaints and incidents that were being reported. Honourable Chair, in terms of the current status with regard to the implementation of our contingency planning, you'll see I indicated earlier we have 187 primary frontline services premises. On the block to the right, you will see there's 6 buildings or 6 police stations that are currently closed. They have been decontaminated. We have in the yellow, you will see there are 4 stations, Kraaifontein, Parow, Paarl, and Somerset West, that have been, upon being vacated, have temporarily moved to alternative buildings. That's in terms of their contingency planning. We have currently 2 stations that are operating from mobile contact points, that being Mitchell's Plain and Harare. In terms of contingency planning at satellite police stations, the actual implementation, there has not been a requirement currently. All 36 satellite police stations are functional. Honourable Chair, if I move over to the operational overview and speak to some of the offences in terms of the lockdown regulations. If we look at the total number of cases, there's been 16,833 cases to date from the 27th up to yesterday. A total of 17,059 people charged. In terms of being released on a SAPS 496, a total of 565 people were released. The 496 is where people are released on a warning in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. We had J398s, a total of 3. That's people released on police bail. J534s, which are the majority of the charges and the manner in which they've been released. 534s is 16,494. Those are AGs or admission of guilt fines. J175s, that's the total, there's none. It's a summons to appear in court, there's none of them. And then currently, we still have 5 in custody. A total of the 17,059 to court. Honourable Chair, if we drill down into the 5 that are still in custody, it's in essence where they are more serious of nature. So you'll see the first one is the Nyanga case, which was a burglary business. There were 2 arrests and no bail was granted due to the high value of stolen goods. Yeah. And those were all with regard to liquor stores or liquor premises. The Stellenbosch one was a burglary business. 3 arrests, 2 were released. 1 is remains in custody. There was an outstanding warrant of arrest prior to this against the individual, so he was kept in custody. Worcester, also a burglary business. There was 1 arrest and no bail was granted due to the high value of the stolen goods. Tilbach, also a burglary business, 1 arrest, and the same reason was given for no bail being granted. Honourable Chair, there were particular questions raised with regard to the issuing of permits. The first one relates to how SAPS officers determine whether to issue permits. In terms of the law, it's clear. SAPS is guided by the regulations issued in terms of the Disaster Management Act, with specific reference to the COVID-19 regulations. SAPS is allowed or permitted to issue only permits to the general public to attend a funeral or cremation. So those are the only permits that SAPS is entitled to issue with regard to the attending of a funeral or cremation to the general public. Regulation 11B speaks to the issuing of permits for funerals and the criteria for the issuing of those permits. Any person or persons wishing to attend a funeral or cremation that needs to travel between a metropolitan area, a district, or province needs to apply for a so-called funeral permit as set out in Annexure C, Forms 2 and 3 of the regulations. We may only issue such a permit to a spouse or partner of the deceased, a child of the deceased, be it biological, adopted or stepchild, child-in-law of the deceased, parent of the deceased, be it biological, adopted or step-parent, sibling, whether biological, adopted or stepbrother or sister of the deceased, grandparent of the deceased, and person closely affiliated with the deceased. In terms of a definition of the person closely affiliated with the deceased, it means a person with parental responsibility and rights in respect of the deceased, or has developed a significant relationship based on caregiving, psychological, or emotional attachment to the deceased. A person applying for a permit must provide a death certificate, be it original or certified, or alternatively must submit a statement as per Form 3 in the event of the death certificate not yet being available. A second question was asked with regard to who may issue permits. The regulation is very clear. Only the station commander or his or her delegate and or the magistrate, who is the head of the office, may issue a permit to a person residing in the area nearest to the magistrate's office or police station. Furthermore, the question relates to the number of permits that have been issued for inter-provincial travel. So this applies to across provincial borders. For purposes of the slide, we've broken it down into the respective clusters, which serve a number of police stations. And you'll see there, Beaufort West, there were 220 issued. Nyanga, 3,536. Blue Downs, 991. Overberg, 659. Cape Town, 619. Tygerberg, 1195. De Gamerskop, 373. Vredenburg, 491. Eden, 1712. Vredendal, 139. Kalicha, 2425. Winelands, 274. Milnerton, 1214. Worcester, 523. Mitchells Plain, 489. And Wynberg, 688. A total of, as of yesterday, 1200 hours, a total of 15,618 permits issued. In terms of how many permits have been issued for intermunicipal travel, this is the other permit which must be issued by SAPS. This is not across provincial borders, but across municipal borders. Beaufort West, 129. Blue Downs, 547. Cape Town, 37. De Gamerskop, 198. Eden, 348. Khayelitsha, 221. Milnerton, 548. Mitchells Plain, 723. Nyanga, 109. Overberg, 264. Tygerberg, 448. Vredenburg, 234. Vredendal, 12. Winelands, 908. Worcester, 370. Wynberg, 98. A total of 5,193 permits were issued for the intermunicipal travel. A further question that was asked was how many permits have been issued for intra-municipal travel. This is not applicable, as no permit is required for travel to a funeral or cremation within a specific municipal district or metropole. The further question that was raised was how many permits have been issued to NGOs involved in food relief. Again, this is not applicable. The South African Police Service, as I indicated earlier, is not authorized to issue such permits. The only permits that we are authorized to issue are for funerals or cremations. The permits to NGOs involved in food relief should be issued by the heads of these institutions, be it a business or a non-governmental organization or a non-profit organization. Honorable Chair, a final slide which highlights some of the key challenges that we have faced since the advent of the lockdown. I think generally there are challenges around the lack of cooperation and non-adherence by communities to the restrictions. There have been contentious issues regarding the policing of food distribution by relief organizations and individuals, which has resulted in public protests and required action from SAPS. There were challenges around school feeding schemes to ensure that the 480,000 poor or disadvantaged learners receive meals during lockdowns. There's a constant challenge around the dissemination of fake news. either regarding planned deliveries of food parcels, resulting in communities gathering, and civil unrest when it does not materialize. I think one of the most challenging things as the South African police service we faced is that this pandemic has compelled us as the South African police service to police differently, taking cognizance of the challenges around social distancing, and then to ensure that we are able to mitigate the risk of multiple infections. A further challenge that we have is that there's a restriction on the utilization of force multipliers, our neighborhood watches, our farm watches, and then the lack of uniformity regarding the interpretation of certain restrictions or regulations. Certain conduct was prohibited, but not necessarily criminalized, which made policing challenging. And then as an organization, we suffer personnel losses due to positive or infections. And then the policy or our protocols around the 14-day self-isolation, if you've been in contact and been tested, there's a 14-day self-isolation period which kicks in. I think, Honourable Chair, to conclude, what as the SAPS we wish to say is that we give our commitment that as the SAPS Western Cape, we will not be deterred. We remain resilient. We will continue to be at the forefront of fighting this pandemic and protecting our people. And we will ensure that policing services continue to be provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Forscale, for that presentation. Members, as indicated in the beginning, I'm going to allow the IPID to do their presentation, and then I'll take a round of questions and answer sessions thereafter. So I'm going to hand over straight to Mr. Loholo and Mr. September from IPID to take us through their presentation. Welcome, sir, to this meeting.
I'm sorry for IPID.
Thank you, Chair.
IPID is going to do their one.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You can continue.
All right. Thank you, Chair. To honourable members, colleagues. My name is Thabo Loholo, the Provincial Head of IPID, and I'm with Mr. September, the Deputy Provincial Head. I'm going to take you through our presentation as the brief that we have received. We are going to cover the Western Cape IPID, whether the question was asked whether we were operational during the lockdown, total reported cases during the period, and the COVID-19 operations related cases that were reported, the breakdown of the cases with per stations, and also a sample of nature of cases that we have received. And conclusion, next slide. Can we go to the next slide? On the next slide, briefly, we just give an IPID legislative mandate, which I believe many honourable members and colleagues are aware what is our mandate. We're mandated in terms of Section 28 of the IPID Act to investigate any cases of police misconduct or transgressions in terms of Section 28(1), A to H and 2. And as it's set out in the slide, I'm not going to go through to each and every matters that are investigated by IPID, but they are limited to Section 28 of the IPID Act. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, the next slide also, I just need to highlight to honourable members, there are certain obligations to the South African Police Service and the Metro Police to notify IPID of any cases that falls within the mandate of IPID, and such notification IPID receives, and it has to then conduct its investigations. Thank you. Next slide. Can we move to the next slide? Well, the question that also, the next slide, the Western Cape IPID operations during lockdown. In this slide, IPIDs are covering the information provides relates to cases that we receive between the period of 26 March to the 4th of May. Whether we have been operational, the answer is yes. We've been conducting standby duties. Just to break down what is that and what we've been doing. We've been receiving complaints, registering complaints, and allocating complaints for investigations. As I said earlier, that the South African Police Service and Metro is obliged by Section 29 to notify IPID of any incidents that are false within that mandate. Such cases are reported to our standby number, and then our investigators are activated to get more information to enable us to register those cases. And in most cases, the police comply to that. And also non-compliance, we are all aware of, in terms of the act, it's a misconduct and also a criminal offense. And during the period, as I said, that we are registering, receiving, and allocating complaints, we also attend crime scenes where we got notifications of deaths in police custody, and also we attend crime scenes on cases where there's death as a result of police action, if there's any rape cases or in rape in custody, which falls within Section 28. But in as far as receiving of complaints, notwithstanding that I've mentioned earlier, that we receive complaints through notifications from the police service. And also we receive complaints from complainants, members of the public institutions, through telephone communication, electronic communication, via fax, and other forms of communication. And also we receive some of these complaints from our various stakeholders. And also during the period, we've also been interacting to a limited extent with courts, SAPS, NPA, and the complainants. The majority of the cases that we received during this period were assault cases and discharge of firearm to a limited extent. The death cases that was reported, 2 rape cases and 1 non-compliant. So a total of 163 cases were reported during the period, as I 26 March to 4 May 2020. Out of these 163 cases, 83 of them are COVID-related cases, operation cases. Can we go to the next slide where we're going to break down the statistical information on this? First, on this slide, honorable members, I'm just giving, we are giving a breakdown of the total cases that we have received. As we indicated, there's 1 death case that was received during the period, 3 deaths as a result of police conduct, 39 discharge of firearm. We received 2 rape cases. We received 117 assault cases and 1 non-compliant cases. Now, the next slide, I'm going to isolate the COVID operation-related cases. On the COVID-related cases, as you may see, honorable members, there were 2 death cases that were related. On this slide, also, I've tried to indicate the gender of the persons or the victims in these cases. There's a column where I indicate whether it's a female or a male. On discharge cases, we received 30 COVID-related discharge cases. and we received 52 assault-related cases, and with the gender that is broken down 15 and 37, and yeah, that is the total cases. That is 83 category of cases that we've received. Also, this slide, we've done a breakdown of where these cases are coming from various police stations. The first slide, I mean, the first column where it's total is the total cases received from that station, and the second column is lockdown or COVID-19 related operation cases. So you may, and also as you go further, we also categorize whether it was a discharge or an assault case. So it goes on also the following slide, the first slide, and also on this first slide, the highest was Nyanga with 5 cases. And can we go to the next slide? And also, if we can focus on the COVID. No, go back, please. Yes. No, go back. Can you please go back and back? All right. Yeah, just hold on there. So this is also a continuation of breakdown of cases per police station. Can you go to the next slide? Can you go to the next slide? Still a continuation. Next slide. Continuation. Can you go to the next slide? Next slide. Yeah, on this slide, I'm just trying to show to the honorable members a sample of cases that we have received. The first on slide 13, some of the cases that we received and where they are and how we've dealt with them. There's one case that was, you get, there are certain peculiar cases that we have received, like incidents where we believe that the kind of instruments that were used by members, it's a cause of concern. For example, if you look at the Kleinvlei case, a shambok was used to a member of public who was walking in the street, and another Kleinvlei case where a member of the public was assaulted by an iron object, which I do not believe that it is police issued. Also, the shamboks are not police issued to combat crime or to prevent people from committing certain transgressions. And also in the Guguletu case, where also a shambok was used and people were assaulted. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, sorry, slides. Before that, it's slide 12. Also, they've also indicated just 2 serious cases that we have investigated and are currently investigated. The Raven-Smith case, there's a summary brief and the status of that case currently. And this is one of those cases that have received major media publicity. And another second case was a case at Samora Machel R300, where also there was a police shooting and one person lost his life. And that also is a case that we are currently investigating. Can we then go to slide 14? Yes, here I've just zoomed in and highlighted the major challenges on our operations during the period. We have made our standby number right at the beginning when the lockdown was about to be declared. We have made it public to the media, to members of the public and various stakeholders. And we, during the first 2 or 3 weeks, we're inundated with complaints from people on complaints that are not has nothing to do with their mandate of the IPIT, and in such complaint, we either assist and refer those people to the relevant stakeholders or advise them if it's a matter that is not within our mandate. So we have our standby number have been clocked with such kind of complaints. And also we are experiencing restrictive movement to interact with stakeholders like courts, police stations, and complaint. And also generally as a precautionary measure, our investigation are limited. There are certain investigations that we're able to execute, like as I indicated earlier, investigation on the standby serious crimes, and generally in other areas of investigations, our movements are limited. And currently we are, as a department and as this office, we are interacting with management to look at forms of intervention and how far can we go with some of the investigations that we could not undertake fully during the first phase of lockdown. And in conclusion, the next slide. To the honorable members, we wish to convey the following, and to our colleagues. IPIT is very much concerned about the nature of the complaints that have been received, whilst acknowledging that there is the number is 163 and 83 COVID-related cases, vis-a-vis the total number of the police service. Many of the police members are compliant. However, the cases that have been reported to IPIT, we are concerned about the excessive force that has been used, using of instruments that are not prescribed, like shambuks, iron hammers, to assault people. And also just some of those cases is just the general abuse of power. That is the concern of IPIT to everyone. And also, again, just an emphasis, also the concern of the assault. Some of these assaults happened right in people's houses, in yards, and some of the assaults whilst people are walking the street, how the interaction in executing the duties becomes a transgression to some of the members. It's a concern how some of the members are doing their business of enforcing the lockdown of the regulations. Also, we are also concerned that there might be also a possibility of members might not be able to report these cases due to movement restrictions. And also, in some of those cases where we are called by members of the public that the cases that they want to report, we have intervened and interacted with police stations, and dockets were open. We still believe that probably there will be a large number of cases that are going to, as the restriction subsides, you know, there are going to be a number of cases that members of the public may be reporting that they could not report during the period. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Loholo. Members, because we have received two presentations, I'm going to ask you to please work with me. So what I'm going to suggest is that we will stick to the 3 minutes. You can ask across presentations. Please just indicate to who the question is directed. I will then allow, after that 3 minutes, I will allow parties to request any follow-ups, and then we will move on to a second, and hopefully we'll have a third round too. So if you could please just work with me so that we make sure that all questions are answered and that members have an opportunity to engage the presentations. All right, I'm going to start with the DA.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you to
to General as well as to Brigadier Foskel for the SAPS presentation, as well as the iPad 1 that we received. In terms of the casual number listed as 153, I assume that is SAPS officials that have tested positive and not actually people that passed away. If we can just get some clarity on that, but then it will tie into a question to SAPS with regard to the amount of SAPS members that actually tested positive. Is that a 153? But also then how many have been requested to self-isolate for the 14-day period as a precaution? And then what steps have been taken to address that shortage in the personnel that you would have experienced? Because I'm seeing a number of 3716 that is ready for deployment in reserve. Was that initially a bigger number and you already tapped into it, or are you seeing in the foreseeable future that you will eventually tap into it? That's the one question. But I also want to double check the nature and to what extent did SAPS officials actually receive training to execute their duties in terms of the National Disaster Act. Specifically, if I looked at the Disaster Act in the Section 27, it spoke about assisting and protecting the public, as well as protecting property and preventing or combating disruption. What has been done from SAPS's side in that regard for training? There's been, to the general, there's been the words, as I was preparing these words in my mind, that a crisis reveals character. And the more I hear you, I hear Brigadier Foskel, and I know many SAPS members are doing amazing work, but day in, we hear about a heavy-handedness. Yesterday, we heard of a couple in Muizenberg. You're probably aware the baby ran onto the sand, etc., and there was no SAPS member actually had on protective gear, and it was all over social media. But what is being done in terms of it's seen that there is a heavy-handedness from SAPS's side. I would like to get your comments on that as well. But also, I was delighted to see under challenges. Not delighted, but under challenges, and I've also written to the National Minister of Police that under challenges you listed a challenge with regard to the restriction on the use of force multipliers and specifically neighborhood watches and farm watches. Does that mean that you are supporting the call for neighborhood watches to actually be deployed and farm watches? That's the one. And then on
Honorable Alan, can you please wrap up?
Okay, I'm covered for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The ANC.
Chair, I've got a question, Honorable Syed.
Honorable Syed, you can go.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, let me welcome the two presentations, and also just use the opportunity also to thank the SAPS and the police officers for the work that they're doing to try and keep our community safe. However, I just wanted to, one issue, and which was touched on now by Member Regan, just around the lack of protective gear. I mean, many times in my constituency and elsewhere, I've seen police officers not necessarily wearing the protective gear, no gloves, no mask. What mechanism is in place to monitor that and to ensure that they also, because that sends a signal also to the public, you know, it sends a negative signal as well. Not only is it a risk, but it also sends a signal, a negative signal. On that basis also, I just wanted to get the sense, in terms of the deployment, what mechanism is in place to also ensure that as and when things are happening, when we see that there's a lack of adherence to regulations and there's risky behavior, what mechanism is in place to ensure that the deployment of police officers is heightened? On that note, I want to commend SAPS in a sense for the manner in which they reacted yesterday to the so-called protest movement of surface. But I want to say that actually should lay a basis for SAPS to actually, would like to see SAPS to be more present in these areas, in the so-called leafy suburbs, because far too often we found cases where people inside of poor communities who cannot help to be out at times. They need to provide food, they need to get essentials, they stand in long queues. There have been cases where they've been reprimanded in a harsh manner. IPID is aware of that, but we found far too few cases where those in the leafy suburbs who've got access to doing things are going out and doing leisurely activities, not adhering to physical distancing, but we don't find the same kind of approach basically towards them. Then finally,
Honorable Syed, can you please wrap up?
Okay, my last question, and this one goes to IPID. It's with regards to the Metro Police. I just wanted to get a sense whether there's been a complaint sent to IPID around the tactics employed by Metro Police at the Strandfontein camp when journalists and public representatives wanted to actually do oversight and they were apprehended. I just wanted to get a sense in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Syed. The EFF. Honorable Klejo. Okay, can we move on to Good?
Thanks, Chairperson. I don't know if this question is for SAPS or IPID, it's probably for both. I want to talk about police discipline, and I'm going to refer to a particular incident which I think we can use as an example. On Freedom Day, I was alerted to a police captain from Sea Point who threatened a resident in Mooley Point with arrest for feeding homeless people, even though he had a permit to do so. So on that day, I raised it with the police leadership and the Premier, and they both police leadership and the Premier confirmed that the feeding of homeless people is lawful. And so this police captain was obviously out of line for threatening to arrest this resident. So he continued to feed homeless people, but in Sea Point there is a Facebook group on which the people of that Facebook group didn't accept this outcome. His photo, his name, his address, the description of his car, and his car registration number was posted on Facebook with lots of posts of incitement for violence. Included in the posts was that the police captain had informed these residents on this Facebook group that he was now prevented from stopping the feeding of the homeless. In fact, he also alerted the residents that I was the one that had asked for clarification on whether this was lawful or not, and for the police leadership to give police stations clarity on what is lawful. So I was identified, he was identified. 3 o'clock this morning, his car was petrol bombed in Sea Point. I mean, it is so absolutely shocking that a Facebook group can incite violence, and they get the information from a police captain who is obviously not happy that he was stopped from harassing someone feeding homeless people. So is this an IPID issue, a police discipline issue? And I want to understand from the Western Cape Police leadership how they intend to deal with this. A man who is feeding homeless people who have no shelter and no food, and there are no people out and about to feed people who are desperate, like you and I would normally give a few rand or maybe something to eat. We are all locked up, so people are hungry on the street. And here's someone feeding them from the boot of his car using strict distancing protocols, and his car was petrol bombed in Sea Point at 3 o'clock this morning. This cannot be the kind of city or province we live in, and I'm really looking for some leadership from police on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. I'm going to ask, is Honourable Klejo on the line? All right. If not, I'm going to hand over to Brigadier Forscale and Lieutenant General Matakata to answer all SAP's questions first, and then I will give Mr. Loholo the opportunity to answer the iPad questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks from the honourable members who posed questions to us to respond to. First, I would like to confirm what was a clarity-seeking question from Mr. Regan Allen on whether we said the 153 members, is it positive members or what? There are members that have been infected and are positively infected by the virus. So that is the figure. It's members who are positive. And the second question that I would respond to is in terms of the heavy-handedness of the SAPS members, and he cited an incident of Muizenberg, and the fact that the members were not even, having the PPEs. It is an unfortunate incident that our members have been really overzealous in their actions, that if you cannot really see whatever happened at that point in time, you should apply really logic and common sense and see what was the incident about. But to have gone to that extent of dealing with the matter in that way, it is a matter that we are dealing it internally, and as well as the fact that the member was not even having on the protective gear at that point in time. So this is a matter that we're dealing with the station and the member that was involved in that kind of action and the incident itself. Then I would also like to touch on the one question or incident cited by Mr. Heron with regard to the Sea Point matter, which is also unfortunate, as well, that our members, we make sure that they understand all these regulations, and we emphasize that at station level, every time that there's changes in the regulations, they must be communicated in the parades with the members so that there's an understanding and simplify them for them to really know how to enforce them. This is also unacceptable from our side as management. It's going to be obviously the incident on the vehicle is an investigation, it's a criminal investigation that has to take place, but we also have to investigate the member and his own action in the incident, where he's obviously we will be informed by the outcome of that investigation and the steps that will be necessary if the outcome is pointing in that direction. But I must say it's an unacceptable, unfortunate incident that we cannot allow to just pass by and no steps be taken in terms of that incident. Then there is a question also from Mr. Said and a statement. The indication that we as the police are probably in our enforcing these regulations, we seem to be more taking maybe some actions more in our communities that are, and not necessarily the same way or in terms of the leafy suburbs. There's no way it can be like that. Our deployments are spread across all the stations in the province and the areas. Yes, some it's because we're also looking in terms of the crime that we still have to look into and address, where we might have a lot of deployments in terms of our officers and all other law enforcement agencies. But there's no way that we would be treating these communities differently in how we are supposed to address them. And if there is any such incident, I always receive complaints and queries or concerns that would have to be addressed, we do address them. But I must assure you, we cannot be seen, or our way of deployment is seen that we are deploying really in different ways in all the communities, because everybody has to be adhering to the regulations, and we must enforce those regulations in all communities in the same way. I've also want to indicate to Mr. Said in terms of the lack of protective gear, wherein he said it is not a specific, maybe it was not mentioned which specific station area or community, that there's a lack of protective gear, so members were not wearing masks or gloves. As we have indicated in the presentation, all members are issued with gloves and masks, and in each parade before they're even deployed. These are things we're looking into. If all of them are properly geared and have all those PPEs. And even when they're carrying out those duties or responsibilities wherever, they're supposed to be wearing those. So if we pick up any such non-adherence from our side, we have to address the members and deal with them in the organization. There's no shortage of these PPEs. Well, it's just that if members are not wearing them, then they are doing it on purpose, and there's no control over them, because we expect that anywhere members where they are deployed, they are managers that are taking responsibility and overseeing those deployments and members carrying out those duties. So it is something we will address as we do every day, and communicate also at managerial level, from cluster to station commanders and every different levels of supervisory, so that we really are not expecting to enforce these regulations with the communities, but we are not adhering to those regulations ourselves. Other colleagues will respond to some of these questions. Thanks, Chair.
General, thank you. If I can respond to clarify Mr. Eleanor's question as well. With regard to the 153 positive infections, I think it's necessary to just indicate that of that 153, 24 have recovered completely. Currently, we still have 124 in self-isolation, with 5 that are hospitalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. On the question of the training of the members, we want to confirm that we received the DMA and the regulations, and there were a briefing of the senior management. There was a steering committee that was put in place to ensure that everybody understands, and from there, the workshops were cascaded to the station levels, cluster levels. Our focus is to ensure that the members know the regulations and the DMA, they understand, but also very importantly, to ensure that they apply properly. Now, this is work in progress because the regulations themselves are being changed. So we are continuously informing our members. There is Advocate Klute as well, who is helping us with his team to ensure that these regulations are translated into user-friendly forms, and our members are continuously addressed on the issues. It starts also with the members themselves understanding that they are not absolved from infections. And we are also happy that when our members began to be positive, our members were all willing to be tested. For us, that was a positive thing. As we speak now, we have got a clean force because our members have come back of the call center and of the flying squad, and our public order members are also coming up tomorrow. So we have members who have gone through the testing processes because they understood through the training that was offered how important it is to play a vital role to fight the scourge of coronavirus. Thank you. Honourable Member.
Honourable Chair, just with regard to the question as to whether this has resulted in shortages, I can unequivocally state no. Currently, we have, and I think it's due partially to the integrated approach that we have with law enforcement, traffic and Metro Police. We have sufficient force levels currently. All stations are operational and all units are operational. So currently the losses we have incurred has not impacted on our ability to deliver a service. Thank you.
Thank you very much to SAPS. Mr. Loyolo, over to you. Mr. Loyolo and Mr. September, are you on the line? Okay, members, while we wait for iPad to get back on, are you on the line?
Yes, we're on.
Okay.
Can you respond?
Yes, we can hear
Hello.
you.
Yes, I was saying, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, that the first question from Mr. Honourable Member Said around Strandfontein. We have not received such a complaint. And secondly, in respect of the SafePoint incident, that matter does not fall within the mandate of IPID. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Members, can I please ask that all microphones are muted until you speak? Before I go to the second round, are there any follow-ups on the first questions posed in round one from the DA?
Chair, may I?
Yes, you may. Honourable Botha? Sure.
Thank you, Chairperson. On the response of SAPS with regards to the 124 that is in our staff members that are in self-isolation now, and it was 153, I'd just like to know, and I mean that COVID-19 came to all of us as a shock all over the world. And I think that the first thing that when you realize or when you are told that you have are infected with the virus, you think the worst. So I'd like to check with SAPS, what is the employee assistance in regard to these members who have tested positive? What is in place for them? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Botha. The ANC. Honourable Dagmore.
This is just a follow-up, eh? I'm sure there's still going to be a second round of questions. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Honourable Dagmore.
Okay,
this is follow-up on round one.
Yeah, my follow-up relates to the issue that has been raised about the burning of the Good Samaritan's car in Sea Point. I just wanted to clarify whether IPID was saying, because as I understood Mr. Heron, he was implying that the captain of the South African police, who appears to have supported the, and I'm saying appears to have supported the conservative element in Sea Point, who appeared to be a minority who didn't want the Good Samaritan to feed people, that as a result, that particular South African police officer, there's an issue about his conduct, because the question is, how did this Good Samaritan's ID number, registration number, and so on, is that, firstly, I would like to ask, is the sharing of someone's ID number and provoking on social media, which indirectly could have resulted in this man's car having been burnt this morning, Is that an offence, or is it just simply malicious damage to property? And secondly, would IPID deal with a complaint, or would the police, SAPS itself, investigate any allegations that a captain of the South African Police Service was in some way taking sides in regard to this dispute in the community about whether people should feed or not? And then, Chairperson, if we could please just reserve an item. I believe that this issue and some other issues actually requires a formal investigation by this ad hoc committee or another committee of the legislature, which can call those alleged to be involved in a number of issues that we have raised here, not just police members, but members in the public, because it appears that some of them are actively undermining attempts by others to support the poor and the vulnerable at a time like this. Thank you.
Honourable Heron, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, please, Chairperson. I want to follow up just from where Honourable Dugmore left off.
Yeah, sure.
Because my question is, on the one hand, we have this active vigilantism. The other part of the question is, I wrote to the police leadership and to the Premier, and I don't understand how a police captain in a police station knows that I raised this. I didn't ask for any action against the police captain. I asked for clarity on whether it was lawful for these feeding schemes to be popping up all over the province. And it was confirmed to me that these feeding schemes are lawful. This captain knows that I wrote to the police leadership, and he took this information to the residents who have been complaining and who have set up this Facebook group. And he told them that I had written. He also fabricated, according to them, that I had asked for his dismissal, which I never did. And that is my question. How is it that I can, as a member of the provincial parliament, ask the Premier and the police leadership to intervene in a matter in a way that is equitable and objective, but it gets to the police captain whose conduct is in question, and he can then take it to residents, and he can tell them that Brett Heron actually wrote and complained. And I don't mind that the Sea Point Action Group, whatever they're called, is criticizing me on their Facebook group. I really, as a public office bearer, it comes with the territory. But I want to know, what is the protocol around this? Why did the police leadership tell the captain that I had written and complained or inquired? And why is that shared with the residents, including, as Honourable Dugmore says, the resident's address, name, a car description, and his car registration number? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Heron. Lieutenant General Matakata, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And the questions from the honourable members. Maybe let me start with the question from Ms. Botha, I'm sorry, Honourable Botha, where you ask about the employee and health and wealth support to the members that is self-isolation. First of all, I, as the Provincial Commissioner, has sent each and every member a message that is supporting them and encouraging, and that is personalized to each member, because we cannot reach out to them in any other form. So that is one part. And secondly, where they have communication with me, even in terms of their progress and how they're recovering. So there is that line between myself and the members that have been on self-isolation and have been tested positive. And the communication is really encouraging from their side, that they are indicating how they are doing, and then they're appreciating the support from the organization. But the second part is our EHW, that is also giving the necessary support to the members themselves, as well as our members that are not tested positive yet, but because this is causing so much panic and it is necessary that we talk to the members and give them assurance and make them understand what is going on and how to deal with any positive tests that are coming from a specific environment. And secondly, a decision was taken in the meeting I had with our steering committee that is looking into the issues of COVID and the members in the organization, that we will also make sure when the members come back to the workspace, because in some ways there is stigmatization on this, that we give the necessary support to those who were in self-isolation and tested positive but are negative and back, so that there's no stigmatization that continues when you are back in the organization and in the environment where you find yourself. So there's this constant support from our EHW, and even those that were in isolation and when they're back in the organization, they don't perhaps experience stigmatization and any other form of maybe members not trusting that they've recovered well and so on. So that is the kind of support we are currently giving to all our members. And then there's the issue that has been raised by Mr. Heron around the Sea Point captain and member, and it's been referenced from his side. I understand that he has returned to leadership. I'm not sure who's the leadership. It might be to the station, because I don't have any correspondence at this level that seeks to get answers to these questions that are being raised. But I will maybe request if I can also be copied of the correspondence sent to the leadership, maybe at the station, at whatever level, so that we can ensure that there is investigation and the investigation is conducted at a proper level to get to the bottom of this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, I'm now going to move on to round 2. I see the DA.
Chairperson, just a point of clarity, if I may.
Yes, sure. Honourable Heron.
Can the Police Commissioner please give the correct address for this correspondence that she wants? Because I did actually direct it directly to her office initially. And if I'm using the wrong address, then can she please tell us which address she would like us to send that correspondence to?
Okay. The Police Commissioner.
Okay, can I give it over now? It's Matakata Y. It's all lowercase, Matakata Y at saps.gov.za.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
you, members. The Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Chairperson. This is Member Ricardo McKenzie speaking. 2 questions. One to the police. We've seen over the last few days, and I must say the work with the police has been incredible, but the last few days there's been an escalation of police brutality, from the Muizenberg incidents to what's happening in Mitchell's Plain the other day. There's just been an increase of incidents, and as you can see from the iPad slide, and I'm going to go to the slide number now. So what can the police commissioner tell us? What is she going to do from today onwards to de-escalate the situation? Because the last thing we want is residents becoming anti-police. They've been doing great work, and we need to stop it before it escalates into our communities where members become anti-police. And I really like to, the commissioner to tell us what plan is she putting in place. Second question to IPID. I can't believe IPID is on standby, and IPID can't move around for investigations. The Independent Police Investigative Directorate, it makes no logic to me. And I want to understand on why are we finding about it on day 42, and what has the management been done since day 1 to ensure that they actually do what the access the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, so that they can move around, so that people know, Afrikaans sê dat as jy kat weg is, is die muis baas, because that's, I will attribute it to the police are saying IPID is not around, they're on standby, they can't investigate, so let's just do whatever we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable McKenzie. The DA, you have 1 minute and 20 seconds left. Is there anyone else that wants that time?
Yes, Regan Allen here again. Thank you, Chairperson, and I echo the sentiments raised by Member Mackenzie. Also, just back to the presentation. SAPS and Brigadier Forskill mentioned an amount of 187 buildings, and it was in 151 and 36. And if I recall, Brigadier Forskill, there was, through you, Chair, there was a scenario with regard to other buildings within the annual performance plan of last year, which depicted another 120 buildings, which included the dog units, etc. If you can just speak more to that amount, because if I remember what you stated regarding 37 stations could be closed, or if that happens, it will be neighboring stations. How would that work? For example, would a neighboring station be in terms of distance, or what if it happens in a rural area where it must be closed? What would be the scenario? Because it could be over 100 kilometers to get to the next nearest station again. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. The ANC.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's Member Kama. Chair, let me first welcome the two presentations from SAPS and IPID, and perhaps also, like in all other members, welcome really the work that they've been doing, and seemingly, Chair, the space that police now are operating in has become a very contested space. With the campaigns, because we can see there's also a concerted campaign around police brutality, and pictures that are shared in social media, and at some point without really even understanding what is the situation there, but purport it at times to be police brutality. But the question that I wanted to have, which I think the Commissioner touched on it in the responses, is around the feeling of the members of SAPS themselves, because we continue to talk about police as if these members they can't be infected by this virus. So I wanted to understand what mechanisms do we have in place to make sure that we received complaints from the actual members and address their concerns as they raise them. And the other question I had for SAPS, Chair, is, because if you drive in any township, especially your so-called Black African townships, you'll realize that other members of the community are not abiding by the regulations, and seemingly SAPS does not have the adequate resource to respond to that. Now, I want to check if do SAPS have any assistance available, like from traffic, from your different law enforcement officers, to try and enforce the law directly in these township areas. The other question I have, Chair, which is a clarity lastly from for IPID, is I think on the issue of the sham box, if you can please elaborate, because you mentioned that there are sham box that are used, which you, in your view, are not a police-issued instrument to combat crime. Now, I just want to get really a clarity on that. Is it sham box that someone just comes with it from home and use it at work? The other question that I have, you said in your challenges that you have a number of complaints that are coming
Honourable
to
Kama,
you.
can you please wrap up?
Thanks, Chair, I'm doing so. The complaints that are coming to IPID, which are not within your mandate. Now, I want to check within those, perhaps also those of law enforcement, and how do we ensure these complaints get to go to the right offices and they are dealt with? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Kama. The EFF. If not, good. Are there any further questions, Honourable Heron? Okay, if not, I'm going to hand over to SAPS.
Thank you, Chair, and to the honourable members who raised the questions. I'll start with the one raised by Mr. Mackenzie. In terms of citing there's an escalation or an increase in the incidents of police heavy-handedness. I must say, how do we deal with it? Firstly, we receive as well as the organization the complaints either through social media or from the media itself, and as an organization and through our structures that we are working with in terms of the JOCOM structure, we communicate with cluster commanders daily on these matters. Secondly, also to the station commanders, and as well as because as senior managers we visit the operations and areas where we have deployed members, we engage the members. I've been also to the parades, even at station level, where I address the members and remind them what kind of operations we are dealing with at this point in time and the kind of conduct and behavior that is expected from them. On receiving any of these complaints regarding the assault or brutal handling of our communities, an investigation is then started from the station level, especially where there's a member that has been identified, or we can try and investigate the incident, even if there's no member identified. And so that we can address the issues and consequence management to take place with the relevant members or members that have been involved in any of such conduct and behavior. And I must say some of this, as maybe from the presentation by IPID, we would only be informed if there's an investigation that is finalized and recommendations sent to us, if we are not informed or aware of those, as was indicated by IPID, how they receive some of these matters. But we also investigate them as and when we are informed, or it's reported, or we pick it on social media, or there's an inquiry from the media. And therefore, we finalize it by addressing it internally as a disciplinary matter, depending on what recommendations have come out. And we are satisfied that that member is responsible for that kind of conduct. Then, if I may address the question raised by Mr. Khan, in terms of the concerns that are being raised by members. We do, as indicated, we visit the members. We make sure that we motivate them and we explain, how we understand that sometimes it's not an easy task that they're confronted with, and for them to also emphasize what are they currently dealing with and how they should understand it. It's more about saving lives than more than anything else that we are dealing with as the police at this point in time, with all other law enforcement. And you really make sure you motivate the members, whether at the parades or we go and visit them where they are deployed, and make sure that we give the necessary support. We also have deployed in some of our, especially the roadblocks in some of the far outlying areas, our own chaplains to go and give the necessary support and motivate the members. In terms of the resourcing, and we have an integration as it is with as was maybe pointed out in the presentation, with the SANDF, Metro Police, and the traffic and law enforcement officers, where, as indicated as well, that we don't really have a shortage, but there's always the outcry from communities where there's an escalation of some form of these incidents, that they would want to see the SANDF also coming if we have incidents like taxi violence that is flaring up in an area, or gang violence that might be taking place in a specific area. So we are dealing with those requests and outcries at certain points when we are confronted with those. And I must say, we are also going to do a reappreciation. Yesterday, I was going around with the co-chairperson of the Net Joint General from the SNDF from National Office, where we're looking at also making more requests from their side, pending what would be the outcome of that request, that we need maybe to get some more resources from the SNDF. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I know that there was questions directed to IPID.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Brigadier Forska.
Sorry, thank you. Just in terms of some of the questions, I think there were 1 or 2 questions raised by Mr. Allen. I think you're 100% correct. There are additional police premises. I think that we indicated in our annual operational plan. I think for purposes of the presentation, we confined ourselves, if you'll see on the presentation, to frontline services. This refers to premises where we have direct interaction or contact with the communities. As we've determined that is where the greatest risk is in terms of the movement of personnel and contact. So the other premises are in essence to a large degree administrative premises, or like our 101 Centre, our provincial office, our cluster offices, which are in essence administrative environments where we've restricted all kind of contact and entrance to the respective buildings. With regard to the second aspect around the rural areas and the places and the stations which we identified where they will go to, and another police station or services will be relayed to another police station, and in rural areas the distance could be problematic. That is 100% correct. We have an exact breakdown as to the stations where the services will be relayed to in terms of the contingency plan. I can assure you that the stations where in the rural areas are not being relayed to stations that are 100 kilometers away. This in essence refers more to your metropolitan stations, which is very urbanized, and your stations are in close proximity to each other. If I could give you one example, was the issue around Cape Town recently, where we relayed the services to Seapoint Police Station. So in that kind of sphere, within a radius of 5 to 10 kilometers is what we are looking at with regard to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Is there?
Chairperson?
Yes, sure.
From IPID, may I respond?
Yes, you may, sir.
Thank you. Chair, first, to the questions that have been posed by honorable members, I'll go back to the clarification from honorable member Dagmo on the Seapoint case. In that case, from the scenario that is sketched, there seems to be elements of incitement and also elements of abuse of power or executing duties in a biased manner. And the question that was asked, whether will that case be within the mandate of IPID or not, or if whether also is there a possible criminal offense. My response therefore will be, if there are elements from what comes from the elements of incitement, and incitement is a criminal offense, if there are such elements, a formal criminal case must be lodged. And also, if there are elements of abuse of power by the said member, a formal complaint need to be lodged, obviously, to the Provincial Commissioner's office, because that is a matter that is a disciplinary in nature and a management issue. And if a case of incitement-related case is opened, such a case obviously will be a case that is investigated by police, because the mandate of IPID is limited to Section 28. There are certain criminal cases that IPID has no mandate to investigate as limited by Section 28. and others that we can take over and investigate, but it will depend on the nature of the complaint that is lodged by the complainants in this point case. And secondly, coming to Honorable Member Mackenzie, yes, IPIT is a oversight body. However, there are certain processes that we follow that have indicated how we execute our oversight duties. First, also, we act in terms of the prescriptions of the Act. Section 29 of the Act dictates that if there are incidents, police need to notify IPIT, and police are aware that if, for example, there is a complaint or a member of the public lodges a complaint within the mandate, that's an example of an assault which is prevalent in this scenario, the police notify IPIT and IPIT take over that docket and investigate it. Other cases that we receive are cases that we do mero moto, where we pick up either from newspapers or from social media, there are incidents that are within our mandate. We do intervene in such cases and investigate. Further, also, we do also receive complaints from various stakeholders who report those complaints to us. In as far we are able to be, our role, the oversight role is not crime combating. So one cannot move around where you assume that there's going to be a crime committed or a transgression committed in a particular place. So the framework that is set out, as I indicated, it's set out in the Act and also from interest parties, complainants, victims, and also from IPIT itself, where we on our own investigate such processes if such cases are within our mandate. Lastly, in response to Honorable Kama, Honorable Member, yes, I think the period that we are reporting, as I indicated, is from the 26th of March until the 4th. So the number of cases that we have received, they are still fresh cases in terms of investigation. And also what we are doing is also to analyze, because there are certain patterns that develops in the complaints that we are receiving. Either we receive from the police, or we receive from the media, or we received from ourselves, mero moto. There are certain trends that we find are very interesting to look deeper and zoom deeper into. For example, as I indicated, there is some incident, not one case, but a number of cases where an instrument is used that is not issued by the police. For example, the sham of that example I've made. There's also an incident where a member of the public, in the execution of duties, he was assaulted by a hammer, for example. Or there are some cases where you find that some other forms of instruments that have been used to assault a person, some of those are not issued by the police in terms of executing duties. So these are the cases we are currently analyzing. We look at those trends, isolate those cases, and also at the end, what we do in terms of the process, we make recommendations. There are two forms of recommendations that we are going to make in these cases. We normally make it a criminal recommendation if there's a clear case of a criminal offense of an assault. We make such a recommendation and send to the SPP or DPP to make a decision whether to prosecute or not. And at the same token, in the same case, where we find that there's some misconduct that has been committed by a member of South African Police Service, we do make it a recommendation that we send to the Provincial Commissioner's office for them, where we indicate disciplinary steps should be taken, and the police management take it from that end. So that is the process that we follow. And also, we also do policy recommendations. In these cases, as I said, the period is still fresh. We're still analyzing, we're still investigating these cases. There might be, because of certain trends, that if it were, we think within the evidence and the information that arise out of investigation, that we need to make policy recommendation to South African Police Service, and that we'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leolo.
Chairperson, Ricardo Mackenzie.
Yes, Honourable Mackenzie.
Chairperson, can I just have one follow-up with IPID, please?
Okay, I will indulge you, but 30 seconds, please.
Quick one. Thank you, sir, for your feedback. In terms of what you said, in terms of your own mandate, your cases you must investigate death in police custody, death as the result of a police action, complaints relating to discharge. And on your own presentation, you've reported these incidents. So my concern was just if you are not fully at your offices and all your staff, all your lines are working, how effectively are you going to discharge your duty in terms of the IPAD Act?
All right.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I can jump in as well.
No, Honourable Allen, there will be one final round. Yes, I can hear you, but Honourable Mackenzie, Honourable Allen, I'm not going to allow any further follow-ups. I'm not going to allow any further follow-ups, members. There will be one last round, and you can pose your questions then. I'm going to hand over to IPID to respond to that follow-up by Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Member Mackenzie and honourable members, I think the first thing that I believe that we all understand, we operate within the context of the lockdown and the virus, and also that we cannot at the office have everyone working. That Hello?
Mr. Leolo, you can continue.
Yes, so I am saying that within the context of this pandemic and the lockdown, one cannot expect all members to be at the office at the same time. So we've got schedules how we execute our duties and how effective can we do that within the circumstances that we find ourselves. And in the cases that we have indicated, in fact, there are cases that we have already completed within the context of this environment. And we cannot abdicate our duties, but also we need to operate and understand the context in which we are operating. That's all I can say, sir.
Thank you very much for that. Members, it has gone 16:45. We have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to allow one last round of questions at 2 minutes per political party. I'm going to start with the DA. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, Chairperson Regan Allen here. To IPID, I just wanted clarity on whether any SEPS member has been arrested for any form of brutality at this stage. If you can just give clarity in that regard. And then another question directed to SEPS is, say, for example, a student residence building. With student residents, are they allowed day visitors to enter the building to visit for studying purposes? If that's a scenario that is very unique, and what is the view on it? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. There's 1 minute remaining for the Democratic Alliance. Anyone else? Okay, if not, the ANC. Okay, no.
Chair.
Honourable Syed.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Thank you to SEPS for the response on the Muizenberg issue that I raised about the surface. I just wanted to get a sense. I see only 2 people were arrested. I just wanted to get a sense as to what happened to the rest of the surfing protesters, and also what's the latest development regarding the court case around them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Syed. The ANC, you have about a minute left still. Any other member from the ANC? If not,
thank you. Sorry, Chair. I think mine is linked to the question that was being asked by Honourable Mackenzie earlier.
Okay, so I'll give you an opportunity in the round after all members have posed questions. Are there any other member from the ANC?
It's Member Kama.
Yes, sir, you can go.
Yes, I was asking, I was saying my question is linked to what Member Mackenzie had asked earlier, because the restricted movement of investigators was listed as a challenge by IPID. Now, I think what he was seeking, or what I'm seeking now, is to get an understanding as to how are we dealing with that challenge, and what impact is it having on the actual work, so that also when action is seen to be taken, it also limits what we might be there as police brutality. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Kama. The EFF. Good.
No, thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you, Honourable Heron. I'm first going to hand over to the South African Police Services for their responses.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Regarding the issue of the student resident building, I think that what is applying is the spirit and the letter of the regulations. We must remember that the purpose is to save a life, and the principle of social distance is very fundamental in this. Now, also the criteria of essential services applies where people are moving. In this case, it's not applicable. They can communicate by telephone, WhatsApp, emails, and they will achieve the very same purpose. Honorable Chair, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. On the question that was asked by Mr. Said on the Musenberg, the people are only taken to the station to be processed, and then probably be either you'll be paying a fine of admission of guilt whenever, or you will be given a day to appear in court if that is necessary. So people are in this instance, they won't be incarcerated and kept in custody.
All right, thank you very much.
Chair.
Provincial Commissioner, Honourable Syed.
Chair, now I just wondered if the Commissioner could say, because I said there were 2 arrests, that I wanted to get an indication as to what happened to the others. Chair, thank you.
All right, Honourable Syed, I'm going to allow that liberty. South African Police Services, if you could respond to Honourable Syed.
Chair, I would have to follow up and maybe link up with Mr. Said on this. I'm only aware of the 2. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. IPID.
Thanks, Chair. The question from Honourable Member Regan on arrest, I respond as follows. IPID operate within the Constitution and within the laws of this country. And the issue whether you arrest a person, whether he's a member of South African police or not, is prescribed in the Criminal Procedure Act. You know, under what circumstances can you arrest, and what the nature of cases where you can arrest or summon or bring a person before court. And if you look at the IPID cases that have been reported, many of them are common assault cases. And in those cases, Chairperson, we have not made arrests, and we look at the cases individually on the circumstances, and whatever action we are to execute to bring a person before court is within the Criminal Procedure Act. Therefore, in those cases, we have made no arrest, because the individual cases that we have received did not warrant any arrest of any members. In short, therefore, that we have not arrested any member in all the cases that we have referred to. In respect of Honourable Kama, restrictive movement, yes, Honourable Member, the movement of all departments, including ourselves, in certain aspect in terms of social distancing and conduct is affected. There are certain investigations or interactions that at this stage we are unable to do, or it's limited. For example, one example is that interaction with the courts, many of the access is limited, and some of those cases that are on the court roll are being postponed for a later date. So the investigation or conclusion of those cases will take longer. And some of the cases that we have reported, what we are doing, there are certain areas of investigations that we are able to execute, but some of the areas we are not able to execute immediately. For example, some that's due to interaction with certain complainants and or suspects. For example, one case, to be able to contact a station where there have been reports of that some of the members or one of the member has been tested positive, and some of one or so members where we have to take statements. We cannot, for the state, for the period that that member is still in isolation, there is nothing we can do until that period, after that period. So that's those operational and issues of reality that for every investigating we are undertaking, we must take those into cognizance in the context of the environment that we find ourselves. In conclusion, yes, some of the cases will take longer because of the circumstances we find ourselves and how we should navigate our investigations through this period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leolo. Members, that was the last round of questions. Are there any burning follow-ups? If there is any burning follow-up, can you please just indicate, Honorable Mackenzie, 30 seconds.
Mr. Logo indicated they didn't make any arrest in terms of his mandate. Can you give us the period? Is it any arrest for the last year, 2 years, for rape by an officer, assault, torture by police, a year or 2 years? Can you give us a period?
All right,
members, are there any members? Are there any further follow-ups for 30 seconds? Okay, if not, Mr. Leolo, over to you.
Chair, I think in my presentation, when I opened up, I said, and also the brief that we received was to report on COVID cases for the period of 26th of March until the 4th. So my response has been limited to that period, Chair, that we have not made any arrest. In as far as the period prior, I didn't have a brief to that question. Hence, I'm not able to answer immediately now. There's been arrest in the past period, but my brief was for this period of the 24th to 26th to the 4th of April of May. We did not make any arrest, Honorable Member.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Leolo. Members, that brings us to the end of the presentation and the meeting for today. Allow me the opportunity, Lieutenant General Matakata and Brigadier Forscale and the team. Thank you very, very much on behalf of the committee, as well as to Mr. Leolo and Mr. September. Thank you very much for the presentations and for the manner in which you answered the members' questions. Members, I'm going to request if you have any further questions for the Department of Correctional Services or for the South African Police Services or for IPID, that you please direct those questions to the procedural officers, and they will make sure that it gets to the relevant departments for a response to you. Can I ask that when you do request questions in writing, that you please indicate to who it is directed, and then we'll make sure that it gets to the relevant departments. Members, we're not going to deal with any admin today, and we will deal with that at the meeting on Friday, when the chair is also back to join us. Members, if there's nothing else from your side, I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.